Hi, I'm Yoram Solomon, and welcome to the very first episode of Is It Really a Great Idea? If you've been listening to the Trust Show podcast, then you know that I've been quiet for a couple of months there, and here's why. I've been heads down writing not one, but apparently two books. A textbook, which wasn't supposed to be a textbook at the beginning, and a companion book, a workbook really, and both have the same title, Is It Really a Great Idea? Those books were published at the end of last month, at the end of June. This new podcast is based on that book and the workbook. And I want to be clear, this is not a motivational show. I'm not here to hold your hand. I'm here to help you kill bad ideas fast. Because the faster you kill the wrong ideas, the sooner you'll find the one that's actually worth your time, your money, your energy, and you know what? Your obsession. Because you should be obsessed with your ideas. But you have to find the right one that you should obsess over. This podcast will be released every other week because I am still alternating with episodes of the Trust Show podcast. So one week I'll release one, the next week I'll release the other. So you'll hear from me weekly, just split between trust and entrepreneurship. That is, if you care about the Trust Show podcast as well. In today's episode, this is the first episode, I'll tell you what happened during those 2 months and how this book came alive, how it ended up being a textbook and then a workbook and not what it was supposed to be originally. And I'll tell you all about this right after this. Welcome to Is It Really a Great Idea? I'm Yoram Solomon, entrepreneur, author, and professor of entrepreneurship in one of the top US MBA programs. This podcast is based on my textbook by the same name. But I didn't write it to inspire you to chase your dreams. I wrote it to help you kill bad ideas fast so you can get to the one that's actually worth your time, your energy, your money, and your obsession. Most entrepreneurs fall in love with their idea too early. I want to help you fall in love with the truth. Because before you build a business, pitch investors, or write a single line of code, you have to ask yourself, is it really a great idea? Well, it does feel good to record the podcast again. I did miss it. And so what happened? First of all, you may remember that I teach at SMU. And until a couple of years ago, I used to teach maybe 2 classes a year. And I started teaching at SMU back in 2018 after being a guest speaker there for several times. The director of the entrepreneurship group at SMU, Jerry White at the time, asked me if I had to build a class called Evaluating Entrepreneurial Opportunities, what would I put in that class? And so I kind of went to the whiteboard and I drew something on the board. He looked at it. He says, that makes a lot of sense. Can you build a class and can you start teaching it? So in 2018, I started building this class, Evaluating Entrepreneurial Opportunities, and I started teaching it twice a year. Well, then Jerry White left. Simon Mack took over and became the new director, changed some of my workload and so on. But last year, Simon moved to another university. And before he did that, he asked me to teach again, evaluating entrepreneurial opportunities, but this time teach it 5 times a year. So I actually teach 6 classes a year, 5 times evaluating entrepreneurial opportunities, and 1 time I teach corporate entrepreneurship, which is something I have experience with and scars from arrows in my back, but that's a story for another time. So I started teaching that. Simon left. Emily Choi moved to be the new director. We get along great. And I really like working with her. And she likes what I'm teaching. And one morning I woke up and all of a sudden I thought, why don't I put what I'm teaching there in a book? And so I was thinking about a small business book. 5 by 8 inch and maybe 180 pages, kind of like Crossing the Chasm or Inside the Tornado, which were always my inspiration for business books. I loved those books. So something like that, something to that extent. And but I never did anything. And one morning I woke up and I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to write the book. And I know only in January I released the Trust Premium book, and I get a lot of speaking engagements, workshops, in fact, one next week on the Trust Premium. It's a powerful topic, but I wanted to write this book because this is the other half of me, of my professional side, and this is the entrepreneurial side. And more than the teaching and entrepreneurship, it's specifically the evaluating the ideas. And I'll talk about that a little later. Today, I'm going to talk about the book, so you'll know more about it. Well, so I woke up one morning and I felt happy that I decided to write the book. I felt happy like I haven't been this happy in a long time. And so I decided to write the book, but I was still doing the podcast. I was still recording the podcast. And I may have recorded one more episode after I started writing the book in full earnest. And one day Maya, my daughter, asked me, or actually, I don't even remember how we started talking about that, if she asked something or I just told her, about the Eisenhower matrix. Now, you know what the Eisenhower matrix is. My guess is you're saying no, but you actually do. You just didn't know it's called the Eisenhower matrix. This is a 2x2 matrix where in one dimension, it's things that are urgent or not urgent. And the other dimension is things that are important or not important. So think about the quadrant where things are not urgent and not important. Don't do these things. Something that's neither urgent nor important, don't do it. That's pretty straightforward and it makes sense. Then there is the quadrant where things are urgent and important. It's pretty clear that these should be the top priority, right? These are your top priorities, things that are both important and urgent. Our problem starts with the priority that we give the things that are urgent but less important over the things that are important but less urgent. And we tend to prioritize urgent things that are less important over important things that are less urgent. Well, I explained that to Maya, and she asked, give me an example for something that's urgent but less important. And I thought about that, and she said, how can something be urgent but not important? And I thought about that, and it's really not easy to come up with something. And then it hit me. And I said, I have two things for you. The thing that is important but not urgent is this new book that I just started writing. It's an important book. This book has to come out. It is very important, but there is no deadline. In fact, at some point I did put a deadline to make it available for my students in the next semester, even though it's not going to be their textbook, but just make it available. That's important, very important, but it's not urgent because there is no deadline. Okay, that's pretty clear for Maya, but give me something that's urgent but not important. And I said, this podcast. I said, this podcast has to be released every Tuesday at 6 a.m., which means that I have to record it by Monday afternoon at the latest because I still have to edit it and create everything around it. So it has to be done by Tuesday morning. It has to be published by Tuesday at 6 a.m. That's urgent. It's not going to be the end of the world if I'm going to skip a few episodes because I'm writing a book. So she understood it, but then I thought to myself, wait a minute. If I'm right, and writing the book is important and not urgent, recording a few more episodes of the podcast is urgent but not as important, why am I preaching it to Maya and not exercising it myself? So I decided to put the podcast on hold. The one thing I apologize is that I didn't let you know that this is happening. I didn't stop recording the podcast. The podcast was always going to continue. But I put it on hold as I wrote the book. Believe it or not, in 2 months, I wrote 2 books, ended up doing 2 books, and I'll tell you about that in a second, in a minute. But I put the podcast on hold. The episode that I'm recording today is actually not going back to the original topic of the podcast, which is the Trust Premium book, reading the Trust Premium book and talking about Trust Premium. But it's just one break, and starting next week, I'll go back to recording the last 4 episodes, 4 chapters. It's actually 5 chapters, but the last 2 are going to be combined. It's the epilogue and the acknowledgments, so that we will have the entire book. And as I promised, one of the reasons I'm recording the book, reading the book word for word, is so that I will be able to release an audiobook based on those recordings, which I intend to do. So now you know why I took a break. Now you know that I wrote a book, or actually 2 books. And I'm going to tell you about those books in this episode right after this. So to tell you about the book, and the book is called Is It Really a Great Idea? And just so that you know what the cover looks like, the words great idea are well, they're not capitalized, but they're big and bold. And then in what looks like handwriting, it says, is it really a? So is it really a great idea? So it's kind of, we're thinking of something as a great idea, but then we're asking, is it really a great idea? Okay, I explained that. I think the best way to know how did I get there is what's in this book is if I read to you the first line from this book, from the introduction, because the book really starts with an acknowledgement chapter. But after the acknowledgement chapter, the introduction starts with these words. I can't think of 2 words that launched more failed businesses than these. Great idea. So I found myself in many business plan competitions, in all kinds of evaluations where people judges just say great idea to something that really, really suck. I mean, it's really a bad idea. It's not going to be successful. And we say great idea. Now, why do we say great idea? I think one of the reasons is, and we do that especially with younger people, but also with not so young people. And we do that because we're so afraid to hurt somebody else's feelings. We've gone so far in being so defensive, being so easy to get hurt, allow ourselves to get hurt, that if somebody says something that I did, it's not a great idea, it's the end of the world. Well, here is something that I tell my students in class, and I had told the same thing to students ever since I started teaching at SMU in 2018. And I think that even when I taught at UTD back in, I think it was 2010, you have an order of magnitude. It's going to be an order of magnitude easier for you to get an A in my class than to get me to say that you have a great idea. And I tell my students that what I'm going to teach you here in this class is not going to be, or what I grade in this class is not the quality of your idea, but your ability to analyze it, to evaluate it pragmatically. If you can evaluate your idea and you reach the conclusion that this idea sucks, you can get a better grade than if you come up with a great idea, but you can't really tell why it's great. So, and I show them this flow chart where I say, what happens, if you have a great idea and I say great idea, that's all great. And to be honest, I really very, very rarely say that I see a great idea, but I have seen great ideas from my students in the past. So if it's not a great idea, and I say that it's a great idea, if you don't know that it's not a great idea, I'm doing you a disservice. What I'm doing is I'm pushing you down a path, because I'm a professor in a pretty, very respectable university. I teach at the MBA program, and our MBA program is ranked number 25 nationwide. It's a national class university, MBA program. So a professor in a nationally recognized MBA program tells you it's a great idea and you don't know that it's not, then you're going to invest your time, your money, your parents' money, your friends and family, and so on. And you're going to start going down a path that I know is not really a great path. I know it's not going to be successful. But I said great idea because I was so afraid to hurt your feelings that I had to say that it's a great idea. But at some point, somebody's going to tell you it's a bad idea. And the worst thing that can happen is that the first time you hear that is from customers who are not buying. After you got angel investors, because you told them that a professor at SMU told you it's a great idea. And you keep on getting money from family, friends, and so on. And they give you money, by the way, not because they believe in the idea, but because they believe in you, because they love you. They don't see how it's a great idea, but they love you and they trust you. So they're going to give you their money. That doesn't help you. Customers don't give you money because they love you. They have no idea who you are and they don't care. Okay, I was going to say something else. So that's what happens if you know that it's not if you don't know that it's not a great idea and I tell you it's a great idea. I mislead you. I don't want to do that. The second alternative is if you yourself know that this is not a great idea and you hear me say that it is a great idea. Only two things can come to mind. One is that I'm completely incompetent in my ability to evaluate your idea if you know that it's not a great one and I tell you that it is. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that I'm not incompetent, but I'm lying to you. Neither one of those is good. So if you don't have a great idea, and I say it is, whether you know or don't that what you have is great or not, I'm doing you a disservice. So I don't say great idea unless it really is a great idea, in my opinion, which I'm wrong as well. So that's one thing that's going on. And that was kind of the impetus for me to start writing this book. But the other thing is, the pendulum has swung. The pendulum was in the past, if we go back to the 80s or 70s or even before that, you may remember the phrase measure twice, cut once. And companies, because the development of a product costs so much that you couldn't do a prototype. I mean, if you were going to build it, however you're going to build it, there were no prototyping tools that would help you do it cheaper and faster. So you'd have to actually think very, very, very carefully before you release a product. You know, I come from the semiconductor industry, and if what you wanted to do is build a chip, it costs millions of dollars and it takes years to get the chip done. The first one. Well, today there are prototyping methods, even in this industry, called FPGAs or ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits. So there didn't used to be ways to make shortcuts, to develop something quick, fast, and cheap. So you had to measure twice and cut once, so that, you know, once the product hits the market, then you're going to be successful. And often you were not successful. So there was a lot of analysis done in the past before a company decided to build a product, because they knew that building the first product is going to cost millions, if not more, take years, if not more. So we were measuring twice and cutting once. But then we started getting all kinds of prototyping tools. So today, building an app is much cheaper, much faster. Building an app prototype is even faster. Any student, not a computer science student, any student can build a prototype of an app or a website, and a lot of other tools. You know, there's Arduino that allows you to build some kind of an electronic device, real-time electronic device. 3D printers that allow you to build something mechanical. laser cutters. There are a lot of things that don't cost a lot of money and can develop a prototype much, much faster. Because of that, because you can come out with a prototype so fast, the pendulum has swung all the way to the other side, where you just build something, throw it at the wall, and let's see if it sticks. Well, guess what? If it's a bad idea, it doesn't matter how quickly and how cheaply it costs you to build it. You still wasted time and money. And the thing is that this muscle in your brain that allowed you to analyze it is fading. You don't have that muscle. Now it's all about, let's just build something and see if it works. Fine. Okay, so it's just going to be a few months, not a few years. It's just going to be a few $100,000 or a few tens of thousands of dollars, and not millions. But it's still thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. And it's still time, even if it's in months and not in years, that you wasted because you have done zero analysis. Frameworks like the lean startup and the minimum viable product, those are all great ideas. But the thing is that they're done so disconnected from the market and disconnected from real analysis that, as I said, the pendulum has swung all the way to the opposite direction. And so when I started looking at entrepreneurship books, I realized that area, that ability to analyze things, even if you're building a prototype, but some analysis, was missing. It is missing. We kind of dropped it on the other side of where the pendulum came from, and we left it there. And now it's all just build it and test it, and that's it. No need to analyze. You'll analyze the results. But even analyzing the results requires some effort. So this was the motivation for me to write this book, because it is unique. My approach in my class is unique. It is about analysis, even if all you do is analyze what you're going to build as a prototype, because sometimes you don't get a second chance to make a first impression if the first prototype fails. Doesn't mean you have to measure twice or 3 times or 20 times before you cut once, but it still means that you do have some responsibility to do some analysis. So I wanted to bring that analysis. I wanted to write this book. Now I'll tell you a bit about how I wrote the book, because that was amazing by itself. So first, kind of put a timeline. I recorded the last episode of this podcast on April, I think, 18 or launched it then. And shortly before that, I started writing the outline for the book. So just so that you know, I spent 4 weeks writing an outline. The outline had 10,000 words. And only then I started writing, because the outline was not just chapter headers. And it has evolved to some extent over time. But the outline included what am I going to write in every piece. Now, here's a shocker. I used ChatGPT. Now, how did I use ChatGPT? Not in the way you think I did. ChatGPT, I've seen way too many videos, and that's one of my pet peeves, telling me how I can write a book with ChatGPT in 24 hours and get published and become a best-selling author, which is another pet peeve, but you already know about that one. So the way I wrote it was, the content is mine, the ideas are mine, and I started writing, and I would give it to ChatGPT and say, what do you think about it? Now, when you work with ChatGPT, and I'm working with ChatGPT Plus, so I can put my content up there, my other books and all, and ask it to rewrite what I wrote using my voice. Now, that's another amazing thing. I asked ChatGPT to write things in my voice, and one time I asked ChatGPT, what does it mean to you when I ask you to write in my voice? And I got something like a 3-4 page analysis of what my voice is. I couldn't breathe. It was so accurate. It described my writing personality so accurately that it blew me away. And so I started writing, and there was a chapter, for example, chapter 7. Chapter 7, I started writing, I think, about fundraising and all. And I started getting into the details because I know how to do fundraising, and I was an investor. And I was at the White House once talking about the Jobs Act and how the SEC regulations are stifling startups instead of helping them. But that's besides the point. I know about fundraising, and I wrote in ChatGPT, people use ChatGPT by telling it to give me an outline for a book about XY. And I've seen people do that. And it gives you an outline, and then you start, write chapter 1, write chapter 2. There is no value in doing that because it's, first of all, you may not have the right to the content that you have there because it goes out to the internet and it finds content that's already out there, content that might be copyrighted. You don't have rights to use that. But I don't use it that way. I use it to reflect on my own content. And one of my directives to ChatGPT was to be brutally honest with me. So I started writing. Remember, my goal was a 5x8 book with give or take 180 pages. So kind of like Crossing the Chasm, one of my favorite books. And I started writing and writing and writing. And oh, by the way, you can ask ChatGPT what would be a good font. And it recommended fonts and sizes and how to do headings and so on. Some great recommendations. Which I use for the most part. So it recommended a certain size of font to use, and I use Minion Pro, and to use 1.2 line spacing and so on. So I did that. I'm reaching page 200. I'm obviously post the 180, but I'm nowhere near the end. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to maybe change font size, but no, even 11 is not big. So it's pretty small. So maybe I'll switch to 6x9. So I switched to 6x9. Okay, good. That pulled me back a little. I kept on writing. I'm back at page 200. I'm at page 250. Well, you know what? Minion Pro has a pretty wide line spacing. So how about if I go from 1.2 to 1? So I went to 1 and it pulled me back, and I keep on writing, and I'm at 250 pages again. And I'm at 300 pages. At 327 pages, I asked GPT this question. If I gave this draft, this is exactly what I wrote to ChatGPT. I'm actually reading from the screen right now. If I gave this draft to Mark Cuban, you know who he is, or Eric Ries, he's the author of The Lean Startup, what would they say? And I asked, say it in their voice. So here's the answer. All right, Yoram, brutally honest as requested. Here is what I think they'd say straight from the gut in their own unmistakable voices. Mark Cuban. All right, look, I love the idea of filtering out crap ideas early. That's smart. Most people chase shiny objects and waste time. But this, it's 327 pages of warm-up. You want me to care? Get to the damn point faster. I'm a billionaire because I don't waste time on theory. I execute. You talk too much about the process and not enough about urgency, scale, or how this turns into a business. If this is a book for entrepreneurs, then cut the classroom tone. Make it punchier. Give me ROI, not philosophy. Who would have thought I'm paying $20 a month to ChatGPT Plus and it would insult me? And similar things I got from Eric Ries, but there was one line from Mark Cuban there, which, by the way, was not really from Mark Cuban. It was from ChatGPT, knowing who Mark Cuban is and his style and telling me what it believes it would say. There was that one line. Cut the classroom tone. Cut the classroom tone. That's when I got it. I'm not writing a freaking business book. I'm not writing a 180-page 5x8 business book. I'm writing a freaking textbook. And I wouldn't have reached that if it wasn't for ChatGPT. So I asked for more what other people would have said and so on, and who the key thoughts are, and, what would Steve Blank say, and he would say something pretty similar. And then at some point, I asked, would anyone, because those were bad feedbacks, I just wrote, I was desperate, and I wrote, would anyone give a positive feedback? And ChatGPT said yes, but only the kind of people who value clarity, rigor, and decisiveness over trendy startup fluff. Here is who I think would genuinely praise the book and what they would say. So I got Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn, Annie Duke, Clayton Christensen. Oh, this is funny. I just realized that when it wrote Clayton Christensen in parentheses, it actually said R.I.P., rest in peace, because Clayton Christensen passed away, and he's a hero of mine. Was a professor at Harvard. So it said Clayton Christensen, R.I.P., but let's imagine he read it. And here's what he says. Yoram is attacking the root of bad innovation, not failure of execution, but failure of diagnosis. His filters mirror the same disciplined thinking behind disruptive innovation. I wish more entrepreneurs started here. And as I wrote this, I was shocked, and I asked the next question, what would an entrepreneurship professor say? And it said this. Finally, a book that teaches students to kill ideas instead of cuddling them. Most entrepreneurship books out there act like cheerleaders. They tell students to believe in themselves, hustle hard, and think big. That's fine for motivation, but useless when the idea is fundamentally broken. Yoram's book flips the script. It's not a celebration of dreaming. It's a practical manual for discernment. Man, I'm telling you, when I read this, all of a sudden I realized that I was writing a textbook. And so I kept on writing. And I wrote 400 pages, actually 398 pages, that includes how I built the entire framework as I was writing it. And it's a framework to analyze ideas. You know what? Let's take a quick break, and I'll tell you about it right after this. So I did finish writing the book, and I modified it. I actually remember that I got this feedback when I was already 327 pages into it. And so I had to go back 327 pages and reread and modify the book so that it gets the tone of a textbook. Now, it's not a fluffy textbook. It's a very hard-hitting textbook. And I say it up front, and I even say it on the back cover, that this is not, I'm not going to be holding your hand here with this book. In fact, I even gave a little story of this bird that, I'm not going to get into the story here and now, but the moral of that story is that not everybody who cleans you up wants your benefit, and not everybody who craps on you or shit on you wants bad things to happen to you. And in fact, what I said right after that story is I apologize up front. In this book, I'm going to shit all over your idea. In fact, I'm going to do even better than that. I'm going to make you shit all over your idea. Because the concept of this book is this. One of many, very many ideas is a good one. And we fall in love with ideas. And I'll probably talk about that after I'm done recording the Trust Premium. I'll get back to talk about this. And in fact, one of my dilemmas right now is, do I start a second podcast that's dedicated for that? So In this book, instead of telling you how to evaluate an idea and find what's good in it, it's how quickly can we kill it. So the approach I'm taking is the faster you can kill a bad idea, the faster you know why it's bad and you can kill it, the faster you get to a good idea. Plus, again, you're developing this muscle in your brain that helps you discern what's a good idea versus what's a bad idea. And let's just assume, and I hypothetically use the number 1 in 100. Let's say that 1 in 100 ideas is a good one. If I can help you identify 75 bad ones, I just improved your odds from 1 in 100 to 1 in 25. That's 4 times better. What if I helped you kill 90%, identify 90% of the bad ideas? I just improved your probability of success from 1 in 100 to 1 in 10. That's a 10-fold improvement. That's an order of magnitude improvement in your ability to analyze. But the important thing is that you do build this muscle in your brain that allows you to really, really quickly find out if this is an idea worth pursuing or killing. And in fact, in every step of the way, I'm taking you through 3 possible outcomes. I call them the ARK, the ARC method or framework, whatever you call it. Advance, can't find anything wrong with it, we just passed the filter. Refine, didn't quite pass the filter, but there is an opportunity for fixing whatever that is. Or kill, don't see a way to fix this. Advance, refine, or kill, ARK, ARC. So that's, you're going through that through a set of 6 different filters, one for the customer, one for the pain or the gain, one for the value of your product, the differentiation of your product compared to the best current alternative, something that the customers are using right now, one for field validation, prototype, minimum viable product, one for competitive advantage, sustainable competitive advantage, and one for a profitable business model. I take you through 6 sets of filters to evaluate your idea. Each one of them has multiple items. Each one of those items has the ARC: advance, refine, or kill. That's it for the first episode of Is It Really a Great Idea? Thank you for sticking with me. And now you know where I've been these past 2 months. Starting next week, I'll be back on The Trust Show to finish recording the final chapters of The Trust Premium. This podcast, Is It Really a Great Idea?, will continue every other week right here. If you're ever had a startup idea, or if you teach, or you mentor, or you invest in people who do, this podcast is for you. Not to celebrate ideas, but to challenge them. So subscribe to it, share it with someone working on their next big thing, or visit isitreallyagreatidea.com for the textbook, the workbook, and more tools to help you make smarter, faster decisions. And remember, falling in love with your idea is easy. Killing it when you should, now that's the hard part. That's why I'm here. Thank you for listening to Is It Really a Great Idea? What do you want to know about evaluating ideas, testing them, and figuring out if they're worth building? I'd love to hear from you. Email me at yoram@isitreallyagreatidea.com. If you found this episode helpful, subscribe, rate the show, and leave a review. That's how others find it, and how more bad ideas die before they waste your time. For books, workbooks, keynotes, and tools to help you validate your next big idea, visit isitreallyagreatidea.com. Remember, falling in love with your idea is easy. Killing it when you should, that's the hard part. Thanks for listening to Is It Really a Great Idea?